Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast presented by Fort Comfort Gutters, your comfort, our priority. And as you can see, we have a guest this week and a face that is very familiar to those of you who are Denver sports fans and hockey fans and basketball fans. She covers everything. I'm, of course, speaking of Lauren Gardner. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time. Looks like you're enjoying an idyllic Christmas winter experience right now.
'Tis the season, Mike Evans. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. Obviously, a big fan of yours, and just growing up in the Denver market, spending so much time there. I've always been a big fan of your work, so it's an honor to be on with you here today.
Well, let's jump right into it because I've so much I want to talk to you, hockey and even a little bit beyond, because you grew up here, you went to high school here, you went to college here, you began your career here, and now here you are, you're working with the MLB network, the NHL network. How does it feel to be one of Denver's best media success stories? How does it feel when I say that?
It feels slightly uncomfortable, if I'm being completely honest with you. It doesn't feel like I'm doing anything out of the ordinary, just having grown up a sports fan, and my dad and I, that's what we would do on Sundays, is we would watch Broncos games. And then when the Avs came to town, we're like, whoa, we love hockey. And we went to all the cup parades, and that's just kind of what galvanized us as a household. And to this day, my brother, dad, and I, we have our little sports thread. And that's really all we talk about is the Avs and our hometown teams. And then we kind of talk about it, at a more macro level, but I'm very honored for you to say that. I just love what I do, and it doesn't feel like work. I just returned from Detroit last night, having covered Patrick Kane's debut with the Red Wings. So it just felt like every step of the way was organic, if that makes sense. And the relationships that I built throughout the journey, I think, are what really matter. And, to quote Maya Angelou, this is going to get a little deep and a little cheesy for a second, but I don't think people really do remember what you said or necessarily did. I think people really will remember how you made them feel. So I think it's relationships along the way that have made this so rewarding. So I appreciate you saying that. And I guess success is that in that light is a great marker, but for the most part, it's just about the experiences.
As somebody who is an Avalanche fan, but yet also has covered the Avalanche locally, nationally, I know that you maintain and can maintain your objectivity when it comes time. But when the Avalanche won the Cup, what did that mean to you? What kind of feelings did you experience?
Everything. I think I experienced everything that everyone in Colorado and the surrounding regions were feeling. I was fortunate enough, Mike, to actually be in the arena, and the way the two seasons and networks overlap, MLB Network, we essentially produce NHL Network, which is amazing. And, it obviously helped me get in the door over there. But once the MLB season begins, I kind of transition over, which is, man, that's a rough one, especially when the postseason begins. There's nothing more exciting than playoff hockey, and I love me some baseball. Opening day is amazing, and April's so exciting. But then once you settle in, you keep looking over, and you're like, man, these series are so good. So it just so happened that we had some issues with their personnel, and when the Avs lost Game 5 on home ice, I'm sitting in one of our big studios doing pre and post for Friday Night Baseball on Apple TV. And I believe it was the Cards and the Cubs, and I was about to host their post-game show. And no offense to those fan bases, because I love both teams. I could have cared less what was happening in that game. I just kept looking up at the Avs game. And I immediately texted my boss, and I was like, if there's any way I could get to Florida, it would be a dream come true. And he's like, it just so happens that we're going to make this, it has to happen. We actually need you. And I was like, oh my God. So I went home at 1 a.m, packed my bag, flew to Tampa, went directly from the airport to the mall to get an outfit to wear to host NHL Tonight later that day at the rink. And then obviously the rest was history. But to answer your question, to be in that building, and then later on the ice talking to obviously Bednar and Sakic. And I grew up a huge fan of Sakic. I don't think, Mike, I've ever been starstruck before in my life, having interviewed a lot of celebrities, as you have as well. But Joe Sakic was the one person that when I first met him, it was the most awkward encounter because I was so starstruck. And then you fast forward to later on being on, the charter with the team, and, he became actually kind of, close friend at the time, and, almost like an uncle in a way, to be there to see that mission accomplished. And, having been there covering the 48-point season, Jared Bednar's first season, it was just so full circle. And to see the looks on, Gabe Landeskog's faces, and, even JT Compher's, Mikko Rantanen, obviously Nathan McKinnon, it was so gratifying and rewarding for those guys. And yeah, personally, it was a really special thing. And I have to say that was definitely a career highlight.
We are visiting with Lauren Gardner, NHL Network, MLB Network, but focusing on the hockey part of it right now. Jared Bednar, you mentioned him. You think back to that year, and it almost felt like at the time this guy was just kind of hired to be a sacrificial lamb, right? Take all the losses, and then once you guys start to build things up, then we'll bring in an established coach to get this team over the hump. Why has he turned out to be the right coach for this team?
That's a great question, and it kind of did feel that way, right? Wall was out, and Bednar only had a few weeks to get his staff in place. He obviously inherited some of the staff members, and obviously everyone there was great. But, when you take something over, you want to install your own system. You want your own culture to be in place. And that's something he didn't waver from. That 48-point season, I'll never forget, loss after loss, Mike, going into those rooms. And it was painful, especially on the road when there was no other media covering the Colorado Avalanche. You had to walk in there, and I felt bad because I didn't even know who to talk to anymore. I remember getting on the plane after another rough road trip, and I can't remember which player it was, but like our TV crew and the radio broadcast crew, we kind of like sat in the middle. It's almost like a grocery stick, to use a hockey term, between like the coaching staff and then the players. So we were kind of in the emergency exit row, and I think I can't even remember who my seatmate was, but one of the players came over, he's like, "We feel sorry for you." And my response was, "I feel sorry for you guys." And they're like, we don't even know what to say anymore. And I was like, I don't even know what to ask anymore, but we definitely have a duty to the fans, regardless of the outcome, regardless of how difficult this season is. The fans deserve answers. The fans deserve some form of accountability. So, Jared Bednar was the one who always showed up night after night, practice after practice. And as cliche as this sounds, and, there were moments where I was like, okay, coach, like, what else do you have? But it paid off, was to trust the process. And he put that new system in place. And it was simple, Mike. And it's what gave him so much success in, his earlier roles, especially when he won, in the AHL, was to just simplify it, get pucks to the net. I know it sounds silly, but I think for so long you had so much talent out there, and they were trying to make it look good, and then there was so much room for error. And I think in this league, they're playing a little bit more north to south, and the speed is so prevalent. And I think once he was able to get everyone to buy in, once he was able to really find a way to connect with Nathan McKinnon, and he gave the room to Gabe Landeskog and some of the other leaders, and Joe really trusted in him. But Jared Bednar is very much so a player's coach. He brought his staff along, and I think he picks his spots, and then after that, it feels like everything just is kind of like in this flow, and there's just like this synergy, to use another cliche term, but it seems to work with this group because Jared Bednar is a guy you can trust.
Having been there at the beginning and then seeing it come to fruition, now that we sit here right now and you see this Avalanche team trying to play without Gabe Landeskog, where and how are they missing him so much?
I think they miss him on the ice. They miss him in the room. They miss him at team events. They miss him at the Halloween party, the rookie party, all of those things. Mike, he is a natural born leader, and you could see that from the age of 18 when they gave him the C. Gabe Landeskog is wise and mature beyond his years, and without him there, I mean, you've been there. I think there is a bit of a void. He has that grit too, right? Like there's so much finesse and so much talent out there, but Landy just brought it when it was needed. And he had this way of seeing what was out there in front of him and of reading his teammates, of reading the situation on the ice, and he knew what void he needed to fill. Without Landeskog, I think they're just trying to I think they're just trying to find their way. Obviously, things are looking pretty good. You look at the standings, I think Winnipeg has been a bit of a surprise in this division. We knew Dallas was going to be outstanding, and then you look at the conference as a whole, and, here comes Vegas again. LA is kind of surprising everyone. Edmonton's struggling, but don't count them out, of course. Connor McDavid is unbelievable. Leon Draisaitl is going to do his thing. They had their own coaching change, and I could see them definitely turning it around. So it's going to be tough. It is going to be tough. But I have a feeling, Mike, they'll find a way. I don't know exactly what the timetable is. Every time I check in, it's kind of a different scenario. And I don't know. I have a feeling, though, that Sakic and Chris MacFarland, too, is also, I think, highly underrated. Will decide which personnel they need at the deadline, if anybody, and they will bring them in. I know they were kind of in based on the rumors I heard on Patrick Kane. That obviously wasn't the fit. But they'll find someone if Landy isn't ready, come the deadline, and they don't think he'll be ready by the postseason.
Visiting with Lauren Gardner, NHL Network, and I think it's perfect that you were there in Detroit to see Patrick Kane's debut. And there, when he had made his decision, and it wasn't the Avalanche, I don't even know, maybe you can shed some light on it if the Avs were ever really in on Patrick Kane, but there was almost this sense of, well, hey, he didn't want to go to a winner. He went to Detroit, so clearly he's not interested in winning. And with some of the stuff that he's dealt with, what kind of player are you getting anyway? Do you believe that Patrick Kane will deliver for Detroit in a way that will leave Avalanche fans saying, darn it, wish we could have found a way to make it work?
There were so many question marks going into yesterday's game, Mike, that he answered in a way yesterday. The minute mark was kind of up in the air. This is hip resurfacing surgery for a 35-year-old. I mean, arguably the best American-born player of all time, but still a very serious surgery nonetheless. And if you look at all the other players in his age range that underwent that exact same surgery, it did not go well. He looked good out there. The Sharks have been coming out of nowhere and playing out of their minds, especially on the road lately, and they lost in overtime. Mike, I don't know if he was necessarily the right fit, and I think that was something that a lot of people were discussing when it came to, obviously, you had to talk about cap space. He signed for just shy of 3 for 1 year, so short-term is important. Is that something the Avs needed or even wanted to gamble on? I don't think they needed to, per se. The Wings, and believe me, as an Avs fan, it did pain me to be there. So I just want to couch it by saying that.
Yes.
I walked into that room, and you know who's actually on the coaching staff there? And I completely forgot until he called me out when we were in the room following morning skate. It's Alex Tanguay. I was like, how could you be on the staff for the Wings, you traitor?
Oh, traitor!
I know, Mike. But it's such a tough thing. Yzerman also another great, right? Like he saw something in Kane. Kane played his U16 hockey there under Pat Verbeek. He was on, the U.S. national team in Ann Arbor. He's very familiar and comfortable with the Detroit area. He also played with Alex DeBrincat in Chicago for 5 seasons, which was a big reason why he decided on Detroit. I don't necessarily see Avs fans in May looking back and regretting that front office not being more aggressive with Kane. I'm saying that now, 1 game into his new kind of like tenure post surgery. I guess history will be the deciding factor, but I am obviously rooting for him just because you always want to see the greats succeed in this sport. But I don't think he was meant to wear the Avalanche logo on the front of his sweater, but we'll see.
Next time you see Detroit and you see Tanguay, tell him, thank goodness he scored 2 goals in that Game 7 against New Jersey. Otherwise, he'd be dead to us. Okay?
Okay, I will let him know.
I'm sure he knows that. I think it's interesting. What great perspective you get to be able to cover baseball and hockey in depth like you do. I'm curious, how do the two sports differ? How are baseball players, baseball teams different, similar in terms of covering hockey players, hockey teams?
I was just thinking about that yesterday because we arrived. I had hosted NHL Now, and this was a last minute thing. We weren't sure if he was going to be playing, if the Wings would give us a one-on-one with him, that was kind of like what the whole trip was contingent upon. And their PR staff is amazing. Their organization is incredible, and their head coach loved me popping into the presser, asking him all sorts of questions. And of course, JT Compher is now with the Red Wings, and he was out just due to maintenance. But it was, I was trying to figure out what was going on because Compher was actually supposed to center that second line with Kane and DeBrincat. And, we got all of our duties fulfilled, so to speak, in the morning. And then we had hits later on in the afternoon. Well, I was thinking about the way the schedule just lays out in and of itself. And this is kind of a hurry up and wait situation, and just kind of plan out all your topics for your appearances on the various shows. Whereas baseball, you arrive at 2:00, 1:30, you have batting practice, and then maybe you'll do your first hit. And you have the opportunity to walk around and have conversations during BP and, gather more information. And it's definitely community-based when you're on site, and it's a much more relaxed atmosphere because you have 162 games. Even during the World Series, though, I found it interesting, Mike. Last year, I covered the Phillies from the wild card all the way through the World Series, which was so exciting. And I can't believe I'm admitting this on your podcast, but I might have become like a low-key de facto Phillies fan. Don't tell the Rockies. I'm always going to be born and raised a Rockies fan, of course. Larry Walker, my guy. But what an exciting run. So you have the opportunity in a more relaxed atmosphere to connect in a different way with the respective coaching staffs and players. Whereas with hockey, it's a lot more formal, and the players are just as amazing, right? Like I've had nothing but great experiences, and I think you understand this, having been in the Denver sports market. You were out here, in the Northeast as well. Hockey's like a family. It's gosh, I can't say enough good things. But you walk into a room and you just feel like people just embrace you. It's like a warm hug, right? Like even seeing, like I was saying, like Alex Tangay and. So the differences are more so scheduling and just bulk in terms of gaming. And then hockey, I would say just hockey, it's a little bit more spread out, and it's harder to access people. But for the most part, I don't know. And people always ask me this. They're like, which do you prefer covering? I can't choose one. I really can't, Mike, because they're just both so great. And it really is about the connections, with people that we end up having along the way. And getting to host NHL Now and then Off Base on MLB Network, they're both just such fun, kind of playful, casual shows where we get to help bring out the personalities of these players and these individuals that make them feel like hopefully they're seen and they're telling their stories, and maybe they're connecting with someone at home that may have felt like alone in a certain area, whether it's they have a stutter, or there's something going on with their lives that they're like, man, that's really cool. Or like just getting to know someone. Like my fiance was watching an interview with Rowdy Tellez with the Milwaukee Brewers, and he's being so funny and so self-deprecating, this interview we were doing with him. And we had a fashion segment, and he was just talking about all these goofy things with his wardrobe. And he's like, I don't know anything about Rowdy Tellez or the Milwaukee Brewers, but I'm rooting for this guy. And if you get to be the conduit to help tell that person's story and let their personality shine through and help people enjoy like their favorite sport more, that's mission accomplished.
So other than being able to do this with you, if anybody watching right now, you have a chance to sit down and have a couple of beers with one personality from the MLB network and one personality from the NHL network besides you, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're putting me on the spot like this. I honestly can say I love everyone I work with, Mike. I think I'm like contractually obligated to say that as well.
Right.
But
who's a little bit more. They're all great. I get you. But who's just a little bit more, I mean, they're just a little bit more out there than they're a little bit more out there personality wise.
so many great people to pick from. The coolest, most surreal moment. This is going to be another tangent because this is how I do interviews. I'm not used to being
That's
interviewed,
good. That's good.
Mike.
Hey,
It's
we're
so
in a
uncomfortable.
podcast. Let's go. Get
I
loose.
know. I get so uncomfortable though when the attention's on me. I'm like, no, I'm used to like talking to other people and getting everything out of them. This World Series, we sat in a trailer with our whole crew. It's kind of behind the stadium, so everyone thinks it's super glamorous. It's like, no, we sit in a trailer and we watch the games, and then we run into the stadium and we do our post-game obligations. I watched the game with Albert Pujols and Pedro Martinez, and I mean, in addition to the rest of our crew, but to see the game through their lens was just phenomenal. Pedro Martinez is probably the person I would suggest, because he is not just an absolute genius when it comes to anything pitching, but he's also the nicest human you will ever meet, despite all the fame and success. He's just such a lovely human being. On the hockey side, this is so difficult. We have so many great personalities, especially some of the newbies. Like Brian Boyle just joined the crew, and he's so funny. He's like our resident, like goofy curmudgeon. And Jason Demers, who played for several teams, including the Arizona Coyotes, is just kind of a funny, goofy guy whose wife was on Broadway. Like, they have such great stories and such cool personalities. But I would have to say, in terms of intelligence and just like interesting stories, Mike Johnson might be a genius. And he's found a way through, and I'm sure you're familiar with what ENPS is, but it's a system that basically has rundowns for TV shows. And he's figured out how to back time our shows. So we can time things out. Our producers will look at him and be like, what is wrong? And I was like, you need to use your powers for good, because this is terrifying how smart you are. So I guess those two, but honestly, we have so many incredible people at both networks. And I think this is probably the same for you, that we kind of have a no jerk policy at MLB and NHL networks. And it really is just, it's such a great culture full of so many wonderful people. Jake Peavy also, like that guy is in an actual band still. And he just like hangs out with random people. And even like one of our researchers on a show, they're going to go see the boss, Bruce Springsteen. And he purchased tickets for him and his girlfriend, our researcher and his girlfriend. And I think he got them a hotel room for the night. So he's like, as long as you guys can get down there. And he's like, you can't be serious. But no, like Jake Peavy might be the nicest, most interesting person on the planet as well. It's just, it's so hard to pick, because people just keep like coming up in your mind.
All right. So last one for you, as a Denver native sports fan, gain a chance to fulfill a dream of covering these teams and watching these teams. As somebody who works for the MLB network, we're in the Christmas season. It's all about wishes and miracles. Do you ever think you'll see the Rockies win a World Series?
One can hope, right? One can hope. Mike, that is tough. Hey, listen, we saw the D-backs make it all the way, and no one thought that would happen. I can't remember what their odds were to win the pennant at the beginning of the season. It was something insane, like a plus 8,000 or something like that. So, Mike, never say never. We work with Dan O'Dowd, so I've heard all the interesting stories. Dan O'Dowd, a lovely, lovely human as well. I'm a big fan of his. Will go out of his way to talk to anyone and everyone at the network, regardless of their position. I hope so. I want to be an optimist, and I still beat that Rockies drum at the network, and people look at me like, what? And I was like, because everyone's like either a Mets or a Yankees fan, because we're in New Jersey. But no, I'm going to say I have hope. There's always hope.
Well, this has been awesome.
I'm going to leave it at that.
No, that's all we have. That's all we have to go on, just hope maybe someday and see if it happens. But this has been awesome. And please have a great holiday season. We love the success you've had, and we root for you from afar, wherever you are. But please let us know next time you're going to be in town with the Avs, covering an Avs game. Please let us know. We'd love to have you on the show with Schlereth and I, and love to make a big deal of your homecoming. So please let us know.
Really appreciate you, Mike. Thank you so much. My entire family is still in Denver, so I make frequent trips back. But I really appreciate you having me. Obviously, big fan of yours, and of course, Stink. So keep doing the great work, and thank you again. This was an absolute pleasure.
This was fun. Hey, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon. There she goes, Lauren Gardner from MLB Network, NHL Network. And she does a great job, and really enjoyed that. Hope you did as well. That'll do it for today's version of the Mile High Hockey podcast presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Your comfort, our priority. And have a great week, and we'll see you next week.